Okay, divine intervention. So I just have to get some. Just do this first. Yes. Okay. Divine intervention. Do you know what that means? No. You normally think of something quite dramatic, where God intervenes to stop something or to change something. So there we go. Okay. So dreams. Sometimes God intervenes through dreams to give us a message. Have any of you had a divine experience through a dream where you've been given a message? Liliane has? Oh, several of you, yes. Okay. So you have been intervened. Your life has been intervened through your dreams. And what about visions? Has anyone had a spiritual vision, seen something? Yeah, there we are. We have more. God has been intervening in your life. And what about angels? We know there are many stories of angels intervening, saving people's lives, or saving them from injury. Bodil, yes, also. Yes, two people, yeah, angels in their lives. Also, healings. We know that God has intervened in people's lives. And, there are these spiritual healers, but they have some dramatic experience of healing when their body seemed to be very sick. How about inventions? The inventions in this world, I think many are divinely inspired. They get a flash of insight. Yeah. So we are in an age of many incredible inventions that make our lives so much easier. There's the inner voice. God intervenes and speaks to us. Yeah. Have any of you, by the way, inventions, we go back to inventions. Has any of you invented something? You have, yes, both. What was that? Invent, create. Of course, I suppose we're all creative people. Yeah? So, an inner voice. Do you ever hear an inner voice, any of you? An inner voice? All the time. So God's intervening continually. Yes? And then daily inspirations. Actually, I get daily inspirations in my job. Not just my job, but it's like they just come into my head. So, of course, not everything may be heavenly, but still, there's this active communication between the two worlds. And if we are open to receive, God can give us messages. So, we are celebrating Christmas, the birth of Jesus. And if there is ever a story about God intervening in human life, it's around the circumstances around the birth of Jesus. So this is when the angel Gabriel appeared to Zechariah, foretelling the birth of John the Baptist. And that his wife would have a baby boy, that he would be called John, and he would become a great prophet who would prepare the people for the coming of the Lord and the Messiah. So this was very direct intervention. Yeah? And then, so Mary also, Gabriel appeared to her and said, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. And behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus. He will be great, and will be called the Son of the Most High, and the Lord God will give to him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end." And then Gabriel also spoke in a dream to Joseph. "Behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary your wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." Angels appeared to the shepherds, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were filled with fear. And the angel said to them, Be not afraid, for behold, I bring you good news of a great joy, which will come to all of the people. For to you is born this day in the city of David a Saviour, who is Christ the Lord. And then the 3 wise men, they were warned in a dream not to go back to King Herod. And also Joseph and Mary. Joseph was warned in a dream to escape to Egypt. So these are many examples from this time when we remember the birth of Jesus. And because of those divine interventions, it was the beginning of a new history, a dramatic change, which has affected the last 2,000 years. So divine intervention can change history. And we know that through Father himself, on Easter morning, the Spirit of Jesus appeared to him and gave him the task to continue Jesus' work and to build the kingdom of heaven on this earth. And God intervened in our lives, otherwise we wouldn't be here. And for the second generation, you wouldn't be here if your parents had not listened to the voice of God in whatever way it came. So we're all here because of God's intervention. But today I'm going to talk about near-death experience, because I didn't put it on that list, actually. I should have. I meant to. And so the near-death experience, you may have read a few books. How many of you read books of near-death experiences? How many of you know of a near-death experience? How many of you know of a person who had a near-death experience? Have any of you had a near-death experience? Yes, here we are. Okay, thank you. I'm glad it was near death and not all the way. There are a huge number of these experiences. Huge number. There's something called the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation. And this was founded in 1998 by Dr. Jeffrey Long, a medical doctor specializing in the practice of radiation oncology using radiation to treat cancer. He wanted to know if near-death experiences were real by directly asking the NDERs, the people themselves. And it was so he has found thousands of, on the website there are thousands of it says it is the largest near-death experience website in the world, with over 4,500 experiences in over 23 languages. So, today we live in an age where people want evidence or proof, scientific proof, not just a personal experience. But actually, if you have that number that are on that one website, it's a huge number. So we should be very confident to tell people this isn't not just kind of people when they are losing consciousness and the brain is hallucinating because they lack oxygen. These experiences, if you know anything about them, are dramatic and life-changing, and not just kind of in some dreamy, half-awake state. They are crystal clear experiences. As a result of his research, Dr. Long wrote the book Evidence of the Afterlife, The Science of Near-Death Experiences. So there's lots of evidence, loads of it. And what's interesting is that on average, 774 near-death experiences occur daily in the United States, based upon surveys asking people. So it's a phenomenal number every day. Every day. And I am going to talk about one, and this person I have shared with you before, so I hope that you can bear with me, because I find these stories so fascinating, and it's good to be reminded. 2,000 years ago there were things going on where God was intervening, but the number of these experiences and the profound nature of them we should take a notice of them, to remind ourselves that God is constantly working. The spirit world is right now next to us. And even if we live in this very humanistic secular age, and people today may be forgotten about the real meaning of Christmas, God is alive, God is real, God is with us, and we need to be reminded so we don't get influenced by this secular view of life. So this is Anita Moorjani, and she wrote this book, Dying to Be Me, which says, I had the choice to come back or not. I chose to return when I realized that heaven is a state, not a place. And this is my journey from cancer to near death to true healing. This is her when she was younger, married to her husband, and she's from India, but she grew up in Hong Kong and she went to an English school. And that combination of cultures actually eventually led, the circumstances of her growing up led her to this point of almost dying. So her background was very much influencing her and her health. So this is her when she had cancer. You can see how skinny she was. And so she had, on February the 2nd, 2006, she was dying of cancer, of lymphoma. And her organs were failing and she went into a coma. And her doctors told her she only had a few hours to live. This was her medical condition. End-stage lymphoma after 4 years with cancer. So on the morning of February the 2nd, when she woke up, she couldn't open her eyes. Her face was like a balloon and her neck, because she had these fluid was building up, in her body. It had built, and her lungs had to be siphoned, the liquid taken out, because she was like just at this stage where her body was just deteriorating completely. Tumours at the base of the skull, some the size of lemons. Tumours around her neck, her chest, under her arms and her abdomen. Lungs, as I said, were filled with fluid, and they had to extract this fluid every so often, otherwise you would choke. She weighed 39 kilos. She had big open skin lesions, like what do we call them? Ulcers, yeah, around her body. And they were so much open that they would not heal by themselves. And later, when she recovered, the doctors planned to do reconstructive surgery because they were so big and so it was impossible. You would say it was impossible for them to heal. She couldn't digest food. And she had a persistent fever. She couldn't walk. She had to be moved around in a wheelchair. And she couldn't breathe without an oxygen mask. So she had this for 4 years. She tried alternative methods, but in the end it just took over her whole body, and she was on death's door. Her organs were failing. And when she was brought into the hospital, the doctors gave her very little hope of surviving. And she went into a coma on February the 2nd, 2006. What did she experience during this coma? So now I'm going to read her story that she gave at a TED Talk. You can find on YouTube. So, first of all, she says this: I shouldn't be alive today. I should have died on February the 2nd, 2006. That was supposed to be my last day in this physical life. On that day, the doctors told my family I only had a few hours to live. I was dying from end-stage lymphoma, a form of cancer of the lymph nodes. I had struggled with cancer for 4 years up to that point. For 4 years, this disease had devoured my body. It had travelled through my lymphatic system. It started with a lump in my neck, and then it spread throughout my lymphatic system. And after 4 years, I had tumours, some the size of lemons, that had spread from the base of my skull, all around my neck, down into my chest, under my arms, and all the way to my abdomen. By that point, my lungs had filled with fluid, and every time I would lie down, I would choke on my own fluid. My muscles had completely deteriorated, so I weighed only 39 kilos. I looked like a skeleton with skin on. I had these big open skin lesions where the toxins were oozing out of my body. I wasn't able to digest food. I had a persistent fever. I couldn't walk because my muscles had deteriorated. I was constantly lying down or being taken around in a wheelchair. I was connected to an oxygen mask all the time. I couldn't breathe without it, which I just said, but anyway. So, on February the 2nd, I went into a coma. The doctor said that these were my final hours because now my organs were failing. So my family was told that if there was anybody that had to see me before I died, this was the time. So now, what did she experience? Unknown to everyone around me, even though it appeared I was in a coma and my eyes were closed, I was aware of everything that was going on all around me. I was aware of my husband, who was distressed, but he was by my side holding my hand. I was aware of everything the doctors were doing. They were putting tubes in me. They were removing fluid from my lungs so that I could breathe easier. I was aware of every single thing that was happening. I felt as though I had 360 degrees peripheral vision. I could see everything happening all around my body, not just in the room where my body was, but even beyond. And she remembers hearing her husband talking to the doctor about 40 feet away about her situation. She could hear it. And later, even though her eyes were closed, she was in a coma, she recounted this conversation. It was as if I had expanded out of my body. I was aware of my physical body. I could see it lying there on that hospital bed. But I was no longer attached to that body. It felt as though I could be everywhere at the same time. It was like wherever I put my awareness, there I was. I was aware of my brother who was in India. I was in Hong Kong. He was rushing to get on a plane to come and see me before I took my last breath. I was aware of that. I felt as though I was with him. I saw him on the plane. And then I became aware of my father and my best friend, both of whom had died. Her best friend 2 years previously had died of cancer, and her father 10 years previously. But I became aware of their presence with me as though they were guiding me and communicating with me. And one thing I felt in this amazing, expansive self was that I was in a realm of clarity where I understood everything. And I understood why I had cancer. So in this book, this was from her TED Talk, but in her book, she explains a bit more about why she got cancer. I was shown how illnesses start on an energetic level before they become physical. If I chose to go into life, because she was given a choice whether to die or to live, my physical body would catch up very quick. The cancer would be gone if I chose to go back. The cancer would be gone from my energy. And my physical body would catch up very quickly. I then understood that when people have medical treatments for illnesses, it rids the illness only from their body, but not from their energy, so the illness returns. I realized if I went back, it would be a very healthy energy. Then the physical body would catch up to the energetic conditions very quickly and permanently. I was given the understanding that this applies to anything, not only illnesses, physical conditions, psychological conditions, etc. I was shown that everything going on in our lives was dependent on this energy around us, created by us. Nothing was solid. We created our surroundings, our conditions, depending on where this energy was at. The clarity I received around how we get what we do was phenomenal. It's all about where we are energetically. I was made to feel that I was going to see proof of this firsthand if I returned back to my body. And something else, another reason she got cancer, is because, I said earlier, she was born in India to Hindu parents, but she grew up in Hong Kong and she went to a British school. And it was very hard for her to know what identity was. Who am I? Yeah, because the Hindu traditions that she learned at home, one tradition was that you should have an arranged marriage to another Hindu. But she was living in Hong Kong, and there was a different tradition there, and she had a nanny taking care of her who was Chinese, and so she'd learned about her culture. Also, when she was at this English school, it was a Christian school, and one day a boy said to her, "Oh, why don't you come to Sunday school? Come to church, yeah?" And said, "Oh, yeah, but I'm a Hindu, so I go to the temple." "Ah, but if you're not a Christian, you won't go to heaven." And she was very worried about that. "Oh, I won't go to heaven." So she asked her mother, well, he said, "I won't go to heaven." "Oh, yeah, but there are many different religions. We're Hindu, and just different ways." But in her heart and mind, she was not at peace because she was afraid. It's actually fear that led to her cancer over many years. She was bullied in this English school because she was different, yeah, because it mainly English people, and her parents managed to get to this school, but one day she was pushed against the wall in the playground by these girls, and they called her a racist name, and I'm trying to remember what they called her. But in those days, there were a gollywog. Yes, gollywog. In those days, that was. Today, you can't say that word anymore. Yeah, but and this girl snatched her lunch bag off her, and she was so afraid. And then they ran off laughing, and she couldn't tell the teacher, couldn't tell her parents. But she had a best friend, and that best friend was also Indian background and also picked on, so they kind of had a place they could hide out away from all the other girls. But the bullies cornered this other girl and threatened her. Where's your hiding place? Yeah, and so she gave in, and then they found Anita, and then she felt betrayed by her best friend. Yeah. So she was confused about where she fitted in, but she wanted to please people. Yeah. Also, this Hindu marriage within India, to be a wife, you should be subservient to your husband. Yeah. You shouldn't be too educated, but she wanted to be educated. She felt low self-esteem, but it was fear. It was the energy of fear which led to her cancer. So in this expanded state, she felt connected to everyone. I understand I was much greater. In fact, all of us are much greater and more powerful than we realize when we are in our physical body. I also felt as if I was connected to everybody. Like all the doctors that were treating me, the nurses, my husband, my mother, my brother, and everybody, I felt as though we all shared the same consciousness. I felt as though I could feel what they were feeling. I could feel the distress they were feeling. I could feel the resignation of the doctors. But at the same time, I didn't get emotionally sucked into the drama. Yet I understood what they were feeling. It's like we all share the same consciousness. Do you ever feel that? We are all the same. Energetically we're the same. We're all connected. But we have this feeling that we're separate. But in reality, we're all one. We're all connected. And in the spiritual world, from reading this and from what I've read, you pick up people's thoughts. You send thoughts out. So there's no distance. How many of you have picked up someone else's thoughts? They're thinking something about something and you pick up the same thought. It happens all the time. Even if they're far, far away. So maybe you phone somebody because you were thinking of them. Oh, I was just thinking of you now. And you phone them. So there's no separation. But in our physical reality, we are separate beings and we can feel separate. But in reality, we're not separate. And that was her experience. Yes, so she felt this overpowering, unconditional love. She found it very hard to actually explain the depth, because what she experienced was no matter what she'd done in her life, she had the right to love. We're God's children, so God loves each one of us. We don't have to do anything to receive God's love. Yeah? So everybody is God's child. So even the worst sinners, God loves unconditionally. That's why when we think about Jesus, and he said, love your neighbor as yourself, love your enemy. In the same way that Father went to Kim Il-sung, went to Gorbachev, forgave his torturer. It's like that level of love is unconditional. And then I felt as though my father was trying to communicate with me that it wasn't my time, that I needed to go back into my body. At first, I didn't want to go back because I still felt as though I had a choice whether to come back or not. So at first, I absolutely didn't want to go back into my body because I couldn't see a single good reason to go back into this sick and dying body. I was a burden on my family. I was suffering. There was no good reason. So I didn't want to go back. But in the next instant, it felt as if I completely understood that now that I knew what I knew, and because I understood what caused the cancer, I knew that if I chose to go back to my body would heal very quickly, very quickly. So in that moment, I made the decision to go back. I heard as though my father, my best friend, said to me, now that you know the truth of who you really are, go back and live your life fearlessly. And it was in that moment that I woke up from the coma. Everyone was surprised. They were being very, very cautious because I was so weak that there was no way of knowing if I would stay out of the coma, heal or go back. But I knew I was going to be fine, and I was telling my whole family, I'm going to be fine. I know I'm going to be fine. It's not my time. So she knew she would be healed. So here's some information about the rapid recovery. She wakes up after about 30 hours in a coma. Oh, what happened there? Her organs miraculously function again because when they checked her organs, they were shutting down when she came in. But when they checked them when she woke up, they were functioning again, miraculously. After 5 days, the tumours had shrunk by 70%. But the doctors, being very cautious, they need to do a bone marrow biopsy. They had to take some of the bone marrow out because cancer spreads to the bones. So it was after 6 days of coming out of the intensive care, I began to feel a little bit stronger, and was starting to walk up and down the hospital corridor for short periods. But the doctors wanted to take this sample from her bone marrow. And I recall the day I got the results. The doctor came into my room with a whole team of hospital personnel looking concerned. Then he spoke. We have the results of the bone marrow biopsy, but it's a little disturbing. For the first time in days, I felt some anxiety. Why? What's the problem? My family members were in the hospital room with me, and all of them looked worried. We can't find the cancer in your bone marrow biopsy, he said. Well, so how is that a problem? Danny asked her husband. Doesn't that mean she doesn't have cancer in her bone marrow? No, that's not possible, the doctor said. She definitely has cancer in her body. It can't just disappear so quickly like that. We simply have to find it. And until we do, it's a problem, because I'm unable to determine her drug dose. So the doctor sent my bone marrow sample to one of the most sophisticated pathology labs in the country. 4 days later, the results returned negative. There was no trace of cancer. I felt an overwhelming sense of victory upon hearing the news. But not to be defeated, the doctors then wanted to conduct a lymph node biopsy to find the cancer. At first, so when they did this, she was sent down to the radiology department, and the radiologist was to use ultrasound equipment to find the largest lymph node and mark the spot on my skin where the surgeon could make the incision for the biopsy. As I lay there on the table in the radiology lab, I noticed that my earlier scans taken the day I entered the hospital were pinned up on the light box, showing where all the tumours were. The radiologist noted from those scans that my neck was ridden with swollen glands and tumours. So he ran the ultrasound machine along the back of my neck up to the base of my skull. Then he moved it along the sides of my neck, and finally up and down the front of my neck. I noticed confusion and bewilderment building up on his face. He went back to refer to the scans hanging on the light box, then returned to where I was laying on the table. He asked if he could use the ultrasound under my arms. I said okay, but after checking that area, he still looked bewildered. He then scanned my chest, back and abdomen. Is everything okay? I asked. I'm confused, he said. Why? What's wrong? Excuse me for a minute. So then he went over the telephone, not far away, and he spoke on the phone. He said, I don't understand. I have scans that show this patient's lymphatic system was ridden with cancer just 2 weeks ago, but now I can't find a lymph node on her body large enough to even suggest cancer. I heard him say. A smile broke across my face as he came back towards the table. I sat up and said, right, so I guess I can go now. Not so fast, he responded. Your oncologist insists that I find a lymph node to biopsy because it's not possible that you have no cancer in your body. Cancer doesn't just disappear like that, so I'll have to identify a node in an easy to access location like your neck. And of course, the results were negative. No cancer. No cancer. Released from the hospital after 5 weeks, no cancer. Incredible. That's a miracle. That's divine intervention. Yeah? How is that possible? So this is her, looking very energetic, very bright and smart and healthy. Yes. So through this near-death experience, there are 5 lessons that she has learnt. So let me do this. First of all, love yourself. The most important awareness we have to focus on is love. One of the things I learned is that I got cancer because I didn't love myself. When we love ourselves, we value ourselves. When we value ourselves, we teach people how to treat us. When you love yourself, you find no need to control or bully other people, nor to allow other people to control or bully you. Loving yourself is as important as loving... I didn't quite that good. The more you love yourself, the more love you have to give to other people. Secondly, live life fearlessly. I used to fear everything. I used to fear cancer, eating the wrong food, displeasing other people. I feared failing. Laugh and find joy in life. It is more important than any other spiritual activity. If we had more laughter, we would have a very different world. You would have less people with illness, you'd need less hospitals, and you need less prisons. Life is a gift. Most of us live life as a chore, but it shouldn't be that way. It's unfortunate that when we lose something that we value, that we lose the true value of something. And it took me losing my life to realize the value of my life. Your life is a gift. Even the challenges that come to you are a gift. When I had cancer, that was my biggest challenge that I ever could have had. I thought that cancer was killing me, but actually I was killing myself before I got cancer. Cancer saved my life. All your challenges are gifts, and if you are in a challenge and it doesn't feel like a gift yet, it means you haven't got to the end yet. Always be yourself. Be as you can be. Be as you can be. Shine your light as brightly as you can. Embrace your uniqueness. Love yourself unconditionally. Just be yourself. So with those final thoughts, I'd like to end. Thank you very much.